So, hello everyone, welcome back. We are ready for the second half of our day, and hopefully it won't be such a long day. And it looks like Justin is in place. And Justin, I am going to mute myself. I'm going to stop my video and I'm going to share the remote control with you. And I think you know you have to double click to make it. Hello everyone, welcome back. Okay, wait a minute. My recording is playing back. Okay, what happened? Okay, we have a little repeat problem here, so hang on a second. We'll see, can we figure that out? So while we took a break, we clicked on our live on YouTube site, and I have just momentarily paused the recording because I didn't want to hear myself repeating myself. So we're going to try this again. I'm going to share screens and share this screen. We took a break. Okay. We clicked on our live on YouTube site, and I have just momentarily paused the recording because I didn't want to hear myself repeating myself. Oh.
Hey, Kyle.
Kyle says, Kyle claims that was happening because I had YouTube open on one of my computers and it was just playing it back to me live. Don't you love technology? Learn something new every day. Okay, so I'm going to press play for the recording. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to give the remote over to, oops, sorry about that.
You're good now.
There he goes. All right. Well, thanks for having me again. This next project called Mclaughlin Falls West is aimed at protecting approximately 730 acres of a variety of habitats in northern Okanagan County. And it provides linkages for a variety of different species, critical species as well. Here you can see where the property is located. It's about 25 miles south of the Canadian border in north central Washington. It's about halfway between Tonasket and Omak in Okanagan County. And as you can see in relation to other Fish and Wildlife properties, it sits across the river from the Mclaughlin Falls unit of the Snohomish Wildlife Area and near Carter Mountain, the Carter Mountain unit. And here you can see just a variety of different public lands that it would be complementing in terms of landscape protection. Here's just an ortho image of the property. You can see that it borders the Okanagan River for quite some distance, and it is across. It sits between two different wildlife area units of the Snohomish that help in that linkage. So the acquisition of this property would complement a number of different local and statewide plans. The protection of sagebrush steppe, ponderosa pine forest, riparian habitats would help implement the state wildlife action plan and the species that it aims to help. And as well as the Arid Lands Initiative, which is aimed at protecting arid lands, not just sagebrush steppe, but a number of different habitats within the Columbia Basin ecoregion. Here in the photo, you can see a view from the top of the hill where you got a variety of different habitats, riverine, pine forest, and sagebrush steppe. You know, part of the Arid Lands Initiative are priority core areas, and you can see the project area lies at the edge of the Tunk Valley PCA, and it just shows you the level of importance of this particular property and how it relates to linkage between habitats. The sharp tail in yellow, you can see it on the map, of its core areas or priority areas to manage. And you know, from the site, the landscape is you know, striking in terms of its diversity in the sagebrush steppe and the other habitats that are on the property. It also would protect about two and a quarter miles of the Okanagan River. That would help implement the Upper Columbia Spring Chinook and Steelhead recovery plan by protecting the riparian habitat along the river. It would in turn help the steelhead populations that use this river. The sagebrush steppe as well, conserving that would help enhance existing and mule deer species. The acquisition is an important component of the mule deer management plan, and it's also important for a number of different PHS species that have been identified. In addition, this project will help enhance a Mule Deer Foundation project called Safe Passage 97 that's intended to help mule deer traverse through the Highway 97 corridor by you know, providing additional habitat for mule deer. It adds another component to the project and helps the health of the mule deer population at this site. And just in general, just the number of priority habitats in this on this property is you know, from the ponderosa pine stands to the cliffs that support a number of swifts and swallows and raptors, to the riparian component. It provides just an important property in this stretch of the Okanagan River. In fact, probably the last remaining wild stretch of the Okanagan left in its watershed. And you know, these habitats support just a number of priority species from cavity nesting birds like wood ducks and mergansers to the raptors that utilize the hillsides, and on this property, the 900+ foot rock cliffs, to the mule deer population that's resident and migratory here, and then predators that also rely on those species for survival. And like I said, this is just such a diverse stretch. You've got cliff and canyon habitat, ponderosa pine, shrub steppe, riverine, and there's even a very sliver of dune habitat that you'll see a picture of a little bit later. And here's just an example of some of the shrub steppe habitat that's kind of butted up against the cliffs on this site. It's ecologically, it's in a good ecological condition with healthy populations of bunch grasses and forbs and sagebrush. On the river bottom is I think a very unique habitat, which is the ponderosa pine, legacy pine stands that are at the bottom of the property. And as an example of kind of the overall uniqueness of the site, the ponderosa pine on your left, you can see it has an eagle's nest on the top, and it's a peeler tree used by Native Americans. You can see the peeled bark on the lower part of the tree. Like I said, there's 2.25 miles of riverside and riparian habitat, which benefits the steelhead population, the listed steelhead population, and a number of species of greatest conservation need and priority species. Mobility, like I said, linkages. You can see that the corridor, and this represents a corridor between the Kettle Mountains and the Cascade Crest. This is a analysis done where it's least cost, and it benefits a number of focal species. In this case, sharp-tailed grouse, lynx, and mule deer. And on the right, it just indicates just kind of this kind of a backbone of this area that allows for north-south migration. And this is a really important aspect with climate change when habitats to the south become less functional. This provides a corridor for migration north. And I think its uniqueness is in its the amount of riparian habitat, 2.25 miles along the Okanagan River, and it's a very wild stretch with no development. There's a single residence across the river, but and it includes Mclaughlin Falls, which is a pretty neat aspect. This slide will indicate steelhead use in the future. I just didn't have the data currently, but on the property has a number of imperiled habitats indicated in the natural heritage work done by the DNR. Like I mentioned, the riparian has some grassland habitat, big sagebrush steppe, and ponderosa pine woodlands. And this is kind of an example, and all these photos are on site of some of those habitats, the large ponderosa pine along the riverine portions, the riparian habitat, and the healthy stands of sagebrush steppe that support a number of PHS species like the Lewis's woodpecker, potentially sharp-tailed grouse that could use the site in the future. There are populations to the east in the Tunk, which is only a couple miles away. Western gray squirrel, that potentially could be there. It's got the amount of pine forest for that, and golden eagles that are on the site that use the cliffs on the property, and just a variety of bird species like mergansers in the river, warblers, bald eagle. There's 2 bald eagle nests on the property, heron and migratory songbirds. And like the quality of habitat, it's high. The river stretch is, like I said, wild, and the riparian component is good with very little shore erosion. The steppe, there has been grazing in the past. It's not grazed now. The forbs and the bunch grasses and the shrubs are there, making the habitat pretty good. and again, like I said, that the ponderosa pine stands very unique and along the river, and then the cliffs and canyons provide habitat for a number of species. And again, the sagebrush steppe quality for those obligate species and species like mule deer are good. So this slide just indicates, the current extent of sagebrush in steppe in Washington, and its reduction over the years, and just kind of a location of where the project falls in relation to that habitat. Development is a concern here. That the property is split currently into 51 separate parcels. It's near the community of Krumbacher, and it's very, would be, very desirable for a developed with the views and the river frontage. It's the risk of development would be high. This slide just shows kind of the critical habitat for steelhead. That's spring chinook. It should not be. There's a fall chinook, spring chinook are extirpated in this part of the stretch, but the steelhead, listed steelhead would benefit for having the shoreline protection on this critical stretch of river. And then just the importance of this acquisition is to protect all these critical habitats that support just a really diverse number of species. And the ecological role would be just the prey species and the predators that utilize them. It's just an important landscape for that interaction to occur. And that should be a steelhead, not a chinook. And it's important for the protection or for the enhancement of steelhead habitat that use the stretch of the river for spawning upriver. To be determined whether they spawn on this stretch or not. And just the rarity, I say, is just in the case, it's just a wild stretch of Okanagan. And the picture, this is Mclaughlin Falls that you see here. And for pollinators, just the different habitats support a variety of different forbs and wildflowers that provide habitat for a number of different pollinator species, bumblebees, or other native bees, butterflies. And one of I guess the largest threat for this property would be development. You can see that just the sheer number of parcels that could be used for residential development that would be detrimental to all the different habitat types on this property. The conservation easement, it's potentially the owner would like to sell, and they've reached out to us for that acquisition, and it would be managed as part of the Sinlahecan Wildlife Area that manages Carter Mountain, the Carter Mountain unit, and the Mclaughlin Falls unit. And so that long-term management would be viable. And you can see sort of a number of protected lands that have occurred in the area. We haven't purchased any property. The was in 2012, but the Colville Confederate Tribe has purchased property in the area that help provide protection to this larger landscape and enhance the linkages that I had mentioned. Stewardship, the continued use of biocontrol agents to control. There aren't a lot of invasive species here. There are some, but we would continue to use biocontrols for that. Bringing school groups out, potentially prescribe burning, fuels reduction. The area do see a lot of wildfires, so to protect those unique forests along the river, we probably want to do some level of fuels reduction and potentially implement prescribed burning down the road. And then also continue to provide pollinator habitat for the diverse number of pollinators we have on the site. Like I said, this area has been grazed. Currently, it isn't grazed. You can see the photo on the left is an old cattle trail that's beginning to grow back in with annual and perennial grasses and some forbs. and just on the left hand side, a couple mule deer that are above this particular spot. This project has received a number of support from Conservation Northwest, Okanagan County, which is important, getting their relationship back, and the U.S. Forest Service has provided support, as well as the Okanagan Land Trust that helps conserve and provide conservation easements in the area that was part of this landscape. There's a lot of educational and science value here, not just for the science value for the habitats, but we have a lot of archaeological sites on this in this area. This is an old stagecoach stop near the forested area, and there are a number of cultural Native American sites here as well. And as you can see on the lower left-hand photo, there's a pictograph, and there's a number of pictographs on this property on the walls that you see on your right. And above the upper left is just another example of some of those European settlement structures that are still there. Recreation, there are a number of 2-track roads on the property that could be converted to trails. And I don't see any construction of new trails. There's plenty of old roads that could be used for that, but the horseback riding in the area is prevalent, as well as bringing out classes for educational purposes. But the area just provides just an extraordinary amount of diversity and different habitats and things to see. And resource uses, I don't see a lot of resource use here. Grazing, I don't know is in the picture with this property. And fuels reduction, I don't think there's any commercial component to that. Yeah, I see that a prescribed burning may be something that we would implement in the future. And that's all I have. Open for questions.
Thank you, Justin. And it looks like we have 3 or 4 questions, and we'll start with John Gavin.
Hi, Justin. I think my first question, and I'll just ask one for now, but has to do with the tremendous cultural resource value that's present, both post-European settlement and Native American as well. I'd like to see in your presentation a little more sort of nod to how you might provide appropriate protection for those features. If it goes from private to public and there's an increased public access, what's it going to take? There's tremendous value there. And along those veins, I'd like to also hear a bit more, and I think there's some in the written material, but I don't remember you saying it now, of what a partnership with the Colville Confederated Tribes might look like in order to manage that public access and the education that come with it. So that's it.
Yeah, thanks, John, for that question. Yeah, I really hope we get a chance to work really closely with the Colville tribe. They have property, adjacent to this parcel, and they would have a really important take on how best to mitigate for any adverse effects if use on this site increases, which it would, and how to best address those cultural sites. And we're looking to work really closely with the tribe to make that happen. Now, that being said, there is a lot of use currently because the Kronbacher community it looks like they have kind of free reins of this parcel already. So, to make sure that we don't, risk damaging those sites is really important for us.
Good.
Thank you. John, did that take care of your questions? Excuse me. We're going to move on to Bill.
This is a project that you really need to look at the scoring criteria. It's going to be key on this one. The adjacency of the other public landowners. So it's more of a larger landscape scale type of project. The water, fish habitat, as well as the upland habitat. And for fish, this is a project that if you're looking at identifying what the protections are, what the future management is going to be, this one I think is key. Look at those scoring points and hit those hard.
Good point, Bill. And on that same vein, Justin, in particular, when you look at the multiple benefits criterion, keep in mind that that question is asking when you start to talk about whether or not you're going to graze the property or you're not going to graze it and so on. The question asks you, what are the multiple benefits? And then it asks you how they are going to advance the conservation values. So there's two parts to that. So I agree, just read the questions carefully. I think you have the information you need. It's just you want to make sure you bring that out as well.
Great.
Joe, it looks like you have a question that you want to ask. And by the way, as advisors are asking questions, it's not that Justin needs to answer every question. It's more about getting the questions that are running through your mind so that he can make sure he's incorporating that into his presentation materials. Go ahead, Joe.
Great. Hi, Justin. Early on in the presentation under the ecological and biological characteristics section, and I think you had a similar comment for your other projects, you referenced high or rich diversity, and it wasn't clear to me if you were referring to the number of habitats or ecosystem types on site or the species diversity within those habitats. So I'd recommend if you can be a bit more clear about, explicitly what you're referring to in terms of diversity, and then, to the degree that you can kind of quantify that or provide some, how you arrived at that statement, that would be very helpful, especially since it seems to be something that you've mentioned, for each of these sites, just, for us to compare to. So.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Joe. And I recognize too, in all these presentations, in the final version, I will have tables that line out those species and habitat types that kind of address the diversity. I think when I mentioned it in the past, or in this presentation, I was referring to the ecosystem type, but a part of that is the diverse species that utilize each one as well.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Lincoln.
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to echo what Bill said. I think the context is really extremely important here, and the way it's laid out, it gets sprung on you toward the end of the presentation. It'd be great to see that more up front, what the other protected areas are in the vicinity, and also just highlighting the question about corridors. I was a little bit confused which way they were going, whether it was east, west, north, south. So just trying to bring that out a little bit more.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions, Dave? You want to unmute yourself?
Yeah,
There you go.
I'm sorry, I had myself muted. Justin, these are the questions that have been brought up and the complexity of some of the scoring relative to this property and the last property. I think it's going to be pretty challenging for you, and it would be really good probably just to write out your script especially for this one, to make sure, because you've got a lot of bases to touch. You did a really nice job with the landscape presentation, pulling everything into focus with the scoring criteria and the cultural, the tribe, the tribal. It's going to be, it's going to be a lot, and perhaps just really getting detailed in your presentation will be the best advice I could give you at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Dave. And yeah, you're right. I mean, to have a narrative and notes in front of me is going to be a huge help, and we'll be there for the final version, as well as for all four. Scott Fitkin will probably be to my right, and we'll probably go back and forth. And you know, he's the wildlife district wildlife biologist who's going to touch on all those species specific questions. So right now, I'm just trying to weed out some of the issues, and he'll be a great help for for September.
Yeah, that sounds perfect.
And Pat, did you have a question? You want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, just a quick one. I thought I heard you say when you were talking specifically about riparian corridors along the river and Steelhead, you mentioned enhancement. Or are you referring to restoration of some of that habitat? Or
Well, yeah, I may have meant protection. I mean, there's some enhancement that we could certainly do on this site, and restoration is always going to be a component on our lands. So I guess both. Yeah, I mean, there are areas where we could do some restoration.
Any other questions or comments or recommendations? Hearing none, we are going to move on to the next project. And
Hopefully I have enough voice.
you're doing fine. I know everyone appreciates, I know it's a lot of work and a lot of effort, but folks appreciate being able to at least see the projects. That makes a big difference. So
Yeah,
that's always a good thing.
thanks.
I am now positioning myself so I can turn the mouse over to you. I have a little screen that's popping from window to window. By the way, my little kerfuffle a moment ago was that when I went live on YouTube, I inadvertently had YouTube open on my computer. So that's why I could hear it twice, was because I could hear myself playing on the YouTube. So I'm going to try not to make that mistake again.
All right, thanks, Marguerite. Well, the fourth and final project today is called the Rendezvous Editions, and it's aimed at protecting or acquiring about roughly 200 acres of sagebrush steppe, ponderosa pine, and other critical habitats in the upper Methow Valley near the town of Winthrop. Oh, here we go. So here's a kind of expanded view of it in the east slope of the Cascades in the upper Methow. You can see it's situated northwest of the town of Winthrop. And here's the three parcels associated with the project in relation to existing Fish and Wildlife lands. You can see one of them is a complete inholding in the Rendezvous unit, and the other two border the Big Valley unit to the west. And here's a kind of a map of adjacent public lands, and how these acquisitions would complement a larger landscape approach to conservation. And just an ortho view of the project, you can see that the two parcels are roughly the same size to the east, and a smaller parcel to the west. The east, sorry. The smaller eastern parcel is almost entirely shrub steppe, while the two western parcels are a mix of sagebrush steppe and some riparian and ponderosa pine forest. So this acquisition would encompass or implement a number of different plans. Acquiring these variety of habitats would benefit or would help the statewide action plan and the Sagebrush Steppe and Ponderosa Pine Forest being habitats that are priority habitats for conserving and protecting the species there. The strategic plan, which points at conserving property and for protection of species, and the Arid Lands Initiative, which is aimed at protecting arid lands in the Columbia Basin ecoregion. These lands being at the edges of that region, but still are important where they bound against forested higher elevation habitat types along the edge. Provide a unique opportunity to protect these areas. And sort of a look at what the property looks like. These are photos from the two western parcels looking towards down at Big Valley, and both south and west. And these properties kind of help. They address a number of different plans. The links are just to the north in the Pasayten Fisher Wolf Conservation, the conservation strategy, the PHS agency list, and our state wildlife action plan. So these properties address a number of critical species that the department is valuable. It also is within, like the other Methow projects, within near various wolf packs, as well as within the North Cascades grizzly bear recovery zone. So this acquisition would help enhance, the habitats that benefit these species. Great Western gray squirrel habitat as well in the western portion. Wolverines, that as we recently found out are able to wander quite a distance, and these parcels would fall in their range, as well as lynx. Mule deer as well. So the acquiring this property and protecting this valuable mule deer habitat is in action in various plans to benefit the species. As you can see, the parcels are in an area that provides a linkage from low elevation to higher elevation, where the mule deer spend their summers, and the mule deer population here being the largest in the state. The map on your right shows or indicates where the mule deer use the lands. The purple indicates kind of migration corridors, and green is stopover points. And all this data is from our mule deer collar data, where we over the last 2 years have collared a number of mule deer and have tracked their movements. And as you can see, the project falls right within a critical area of both stopover and corridor areas. The critical habitats here are in good ecological condition. This is the eastern parcel, the smallest of them, having significant sagebrush steppe and in good condition. And the number of species that utilize these priority habitats, the pygmy short, the lizard, the golden eagle, cougar, they all would, many priority species would benefit from this acquisition. Sagebrush steppe, as previously mentioned, you can see the condition of both the western parcels and the eastern parcels are in great ecological condition. The mixed ponderosa pine stands that provide habitat for woodpecker species, nuthatches, and a variety of other priority species reside in these parcels. And then cliffs and canyons. I mean, there's a significant amount of cliff habitat here that benefits golden eagles, peregrine falcons, prairie falcons, and a number of other species that are species of greatest conservation need. Again, you know, these parcels and having you know, where they lie in the mule deer migration corridor would help enhance that you know, that area. And on the right, it just shows kind of a least cost. So if we were to focus efforts in an area, you know, where to get the most bang for the buck, and these areas lie in that kind of a lower cost area. And for the reptile lovers, this is an area rich in different reptiles, yellow-bellied racers, rubber boas, rattlesnakes, the pygmy horn lizard, sagebrush lizard, garter snakes. There are a number of different reptiles that utilize this area and would benefit from acquisition. The riparian habitats that are here, the sagebrush steppe and ponderosa pine woodland savanna, all are classified as imperiled, and protection of these is something that is addressed in the State Wildlife Action Plan and a number of other plans, including the Arid Lands Initiative. As just kind of as an example of the different habitat types here, the protection of PHS species with acquisition, whether it be Lewis's woodpecker, the badger, potentially a western gray squirrel, golden eagle, all these species are at or near, in or on, at or near or within the project area, as well as just a variety of different birds, from warblers to owls, like the long-eared owl, shrikes. There's just a tremendous amount of bird diversity in this area. And the quality of habitat is relatively high, with the amount of sagebrush steppe species, forested species, the different forbs and shrubs. This area provides a really diverse mix of various plant species. And then the sagebrush steppe habitat on all parcels is in good ecological condition. You've seen this before. It's just the extent of sagebrush steppe that's being shrunk, and just how where the project lies within the current extent of sagebrush steppe in the state of Washington. And development as a threat is high. I mean, this area of the Met Howe is under a tremendous amount of pressure. You know, anybody who's ever been to the Met Howe knows how beautiful it is. Everybody wants to live in the Met Howe, and there's constant pressure to develop new lands. So, you know, this acquisition would help, you know, would conserve these parcels from development. And this just shows, you know, kind of how the two western parcels are laid out on the landscape. You can see that it lies on the edge. So, you know, development on this would you know, squeeze, species that are trying to migrate from north to south. And just the significance of the variety of priority habitats and species on the property. This low elevation habitat is critical to a number of different species. Its protection is identified in a number of different plans, like I mentioned, the SWAP and the Arid Lands Initiative, and the regulations in Okanagan County wouldn't be adequate to protect this otherwise. And, you know, ecologically, you know, just the amount of diversity here, and birds, and they're insectivorous, you know, how they you know, eat mosquitoes and other bugs, and it's just a very very unique area. And anyone who's been in the Met Howe can attest to just how, you know, how unique this area is. And rarity, it's in the fact that there's the potential for wolverines, gray wolves are very close, lynx, That grizzly bear was not taken in Washington. That's a picture in Alaska. But the upper middle photo is a fisher, and that fisher was a released animal that was spotted in Mazama, which is less than 5 miles from where this project is. So it goes to show that, you know, that the animals move over the landscape broadly, and any, you know, protecting these habitats, these, you know, listed and priority species use is a high priority. And the pollinator habitat, you know, here is really significant. Just the number of sagebrush steppe species, the Eriogonums, the rabbit brush, all the different wildflowers that you see benefit an array of different pollinator species. And, you know, that, as I previously stated, is the threat is the development, the threat of development. You can see our rendezvous unit on the right is bordered by just a number of ranchettes and 5, 10, and 20 acre parcels. This acquisition would you know, relieve that stress of future development. In a conservation easement, you know, potentially the landowners are willing sellers. They'd rather sell, but that's always, you know, part of the conversation. The properties would just fold right into current management of the Met Howe wildlife area. The eastern parcel would just, you know, be absorbed by the rendezvous unit, and the Big Valley unit would you know, would accept the 2 western parcels. And there's just been an enormous amount of conservation and protection here over the last 30 years. Not like I said, the moratorium has limited us for acquisition here, you know, over the last 7 years or so. But you can see the number of conservation easements by partnering NGOs and agencies, and what we've acquired, you know, over the last 30 years or so. So this adds to the protection of the landscape as a whole. And our, you know, our stewardship in the area, we do a lot of work in terms of restoration and invasive species control, and that these properties would just fall under the same type of management that we currently do, whether it's forward planning with partners like the Mule Deer Foundation, or fence removal that we do with the backcountry hunters and anglers. There's a lot of stewardship that goes on, and we just continue to do that as part of the Met Howe wildlife area. Livestock grazing, there is no grazing here currently. If there is, it's trespass, if any, and future grazing, and just how the parcels are laid on the landscape, and you know, we currently don't graze in the rendezvous, so we don't see grazing as being a part of this project. There's been a ton of support for this work from the Met Howe Conservancy, the Met Howe Valley Citizens Council, Met Howe Trails. This is a very popular area for recreation, and people are really interested to see protection of anything, of any acreage up here, and are ecstatic that we would be looking at something like this. And support from the county is equally is important as well. They've been supportive of this project as well. And the educational science value, you know, I mentioned Scott. He's great at getting school-age children and other people out to get them familiar with the ecology of the area, reptiles in particular. He's always trying to get people more interactive and interested in those. This would also help with the mule deer study. The property sits right smack dab into the migratory corridor, and then, you know, potentially looking at partnering up with various entities to enhance, if needed, the pollinator species. And recreation, like I said, anyone who's been over here, in the Met Howe anyway, has noticed it's just a very popular area for all times of year. And this area is popular in the wintertime for cross-country skiing and snowshoeing, and there's lots of birders and day hikers and from not just the local community, but the massive amount of tourists that come over via the North Cascades Highway or from wherever that enjoy spending time here. So the area is a extremely important resource for the tourism and that economy, and for the residents who enjoy using the land as well. Resource uses, yeah, there's a potential for doing some forest related activity. I don't see it being something that would be anything more than fuels reduction potentially to reduce the risk of wildfire, but that potentially could be. And grazing, I don't see it being a part of future management in these areas. Just the way the landscape is, the steepness of those western parcels, and the current management of the Rendezvous, where we don't currently have grazing. We would make an exception here in this little piece. So, so with that, I guess that's it for me. If anyone has any questions.
So questions and comments. Dave, it looks like you have a comment.
Yeah, thanks, Justin. I mean, making through 4 presentations, I can just barely imagine where your brain is right now, but that's a lot.
I'm gonna do Mark's next.
I had been thinking about all your projects, and I had a thought that you identify the ecological systems of concern, and then you talk about the species, the diversity of species on these. If you go to the State Wildlife Action Plan, there's a crosswalk between ecological systems of concern and the number of species of greatest conservation need associated with those systems. I think presenting them would be really beneficial to this proposal, and maybe some of your others. You should take a look at that. Because I do remember that the Columbia Basin Foothills system had the highest number of species of greatest conservation need associated with it of any ecological system in the state. So you might want to go there and look at that and potentially consider that for using in your presentation.
Thanks, Dave. I think that's a great idea, and I'm definitely going to throw a table that addresses just that. So thank you.
And John, it looks like you have a comment. So if you'll unmute yourself.
Yeah, Justin, I noticed that you have a lot of slides, and actually I think Pat or maybe Bill made this comment in an earlier presentation, but you've got slides, images, maybe even some text that are in multiple presentations. I would try to undo that as much as you can so that each presentation is unique and distinctive. And I don't see a picture of a mule deer that's the same as the mule deer from the previous one, because that's just it's all gonna merge.
Yeah.
And I won't be able to appropriately evaluate them differently. And along the lines of the mule deer, keep in mind that not all of us are wildlife biologists or necessarily big time appreciators of mule deer. So what's the big deal about them? You don't have to elaborate, but just remind us why such a focus on mule deer in the case of mule deer.
Okay.
You can keep it high level, but make sure we're kind of at the same starting page as you. And just one last thought, and it's again, kind of looking at the whole body of work, that is all 4 of your proposals, they pretty much mention the same, in the bigger picture, the same planning documents. I would suggest that you try to find, for one plan, at least with each project, something specific that you can elaborate on. So if there's a project that's under the Arid Lands Initiative where it's in one of the core areas, like one of them you did show that, highlight that. Maybe mention the others or just have the slide up, but give us more detail, again, with the objective of differentiating the different projects. So.
Thanks, John. Yeah, those are great ideas.
You bet.
Hey, Janet, I think you are ready with the question or comment.
It's so nice to see your face today.
Thanks, Janet.
So
Janet, you can turn on your camera so he can see your face. That's something I'm going to ask evaluators to start doing, is turning on their cameras when they're talking. Then it's face to face.
So this kind of maybe adds on to a couple earlier comments just throughout your 4 presentations. So in terms of John asking for a little more detail just now, asking for a little more clarity around the maps, I feel like we've maybe gone from having, like early on in PowerPoint, way too many words on a slide to, in this case, having so few words on a slide, that I think it might, for me personally, it might be helpful if we had a little bit of context textually on the slide, which I think would incorporate the detail that folks might be looking for. And I was thinking about that relative to the plans that you do reference specifically. So I echo what John just voiced.
Great.
Thanks, Janet. Yeah, no, that's a great idea, and that'll be something I'll throw in for sure.
Great. Any other questions or comments from the team? Hearing none, Justin, thank you so very, very much. I know it was a lot to put together in a very short time, but we so appreciate being able to see you and see your projects. And thank you for helping to figure out how to actually take over the remote control.
Hey, yeah, you're welcome. And thank you, Marguerite, and everybody that was on the panel. I appreciate your time, and well, look forward to talking with you all
in
down
September.
Yep.
In September. Great. Well, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you. Take care.
Make sure I escape. So, Lauren?
Yeah, I'm here.
Good. I'm going to do my best to turn over remote control to you. And see if you can double click on the screen. There you go. And you can use your arrows, I think, to navigate back.
Okay.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and can you all see my arrow as I move it on the screen?
We do.
Okay, great.
Awesome.
All right. Thank you all so much, everybody, for your time. I'm Lauren Brokaw. I'm a restoration project coordinator with Department of Fish and Wildlife, working in the North Puget Sound region. And the project I'll be presenting today is in the urban wildlife category, and it proposes to add a few properties to our EB Island unit in the Snohomish River Delta. And so here's a slide just to kind of geographically orient you to where the project site is. This region is Snohomish County, and EB Island, where we're proposing to purchase these properties, is located in the Snohomish River Delta, right adjacent to the city of Everett. And this zooms in a little further, shows the individual 2 parcels we're looking at with willing sellers. And these 2 parcels, you can see how they connect to our existing ownership here on EB Island. And so we really have kind of three goals that we're looking to accomplish with this acquisition. One has to do with protecting wetland habitat. On these parcels, there's about 25 acres of managed open water wetland habitat, along with 20 acres of forested wetland. Another goal has to do with recreation access. Not only would recreation access be provided on these two new properties, but they also connect to over 300 acres of existing ownership that currently people aren't able to access on foot. And then a third goal is really to preserve opportunity for restoration on these properties sometime in the future. So these next series of slides address the first criteria, ecological and biological characteristics. This first one shows in the graphic the Snohomish Watershed, which EB Island is a part of. The Snohomish Watershed is the second largest in Puget Sound at just over 1,800 square miles. The Puget Sound Nearshore Ecosystem Restoration Project looked at a variety of river deltas throughout Puget Sound, and the Snohomish was one of only two that received a high priority restore rating. And historically, the Snohomish Delta supported over 18,000 acres of vegetated wetland, of which about 90% of that habitat has been lost over time. And just from a national scale, there were 7 watersheds identified by the Obama administration several years ago as resilient lands and waters, and the Snohomish Watershed was one of those 7. And here's a zoomed in LiDAR image of EB Island itself. Again, it's located in the lower watershed. Historically, this island was intertidal wetland, and this LiDAR image shows you the relative elevations related to the tidal level. So you can see that if there were not dikes and tide gates on the island, it would be intertidal wetland. These dikes and tide gates were installed in the late 1800s, and since that time, much of the area has been farmed. And this shows EB Island in relationship to WDFW's current ownership on the island. The area inside the yellow line is our current ownership, which is 1,285 acres. Almost the entirety of our ownership is wetland habitat, some of which is planted in crops for wildlife. And it's the largest contiguous habitat of this kind of river delta farmed type in the Puget Sound region. And the area is very popular for recreation, mainly waterfowl and pheasant hunting, wildlife viewing, and there are some waterways that go in the unit that people kayak and canoe on. And you can see how the proposed restoration connects to that ownership. So in 2018, just recently, about 2 years ago, Department of Natural Resources Natural Heritage Program was doing some aerial imagery work and discovered what was suspected could be a rare type of bog on EB Island. And we have a group from Colorado State University coming out in probably 2021 to do a little more detailed study of what is in the suspected bog. And if it turns out that it is indeed a rare domed bog, it could be the largest one of its type in North America. And now the proposed acquisition doesn't fit within that bog habitat, but having a boundary of public conservation ownership would increase our opportunities to potentially restore and protect that bog. And so this is a zoomed in shot. Inside this pink boundary are the two properties we're looking at. And in this hatched red area is our existing ownership. And these polygons show just kind of the area hasn't had a specific wetland delineation upon it, but just using the aerial imagery and knowing the on the ground conditions of the site, this is how the open water wetland and forested wetland fit into the property. And here's an aerial view of the site looking towards the east. In the background, you can see the boundary of the forested wetland. And this area is the open water managed wetland that was part of a past Ducks Unlimited project. And then in the foreground, this is a waterway called Deadwater Slough that is also part of the parcel. And here's an on the ground photograph of what Deadwater Slough looks like. And again, that connects to the Snohomish River There's a tide gate that prevents most fish from going in and out of Deadwater Slough, but it is a popular area for people to kayak and canoe as of now. And as far as species go that utilize the site supports concentrations of waterfowl and swans. Snohomish County as a whole accounts for 47% of Pacific Coast Joint Venture's population objective for the North Puget Sound lowlands. So this area is very important for waterfowl conservation. And of course, most waterfowl plans recognize conservation of wetlands as being kind of an overarching goal to conserve the species. In addition to waterfowl, other species have been observed on the site: cavity nesting ducks, bald eagles, peregrine falcons, pileated woodpeckers, and of course, great blue herons. Here's kind of an interesting twist on conservation of the property. WDFW biologists have been monitoring a bat maternity colony that's under a mile away from the proposed acquisition. That colony supports over 1,000 both Yuma and little brown bats. And those two species are the most vulnerable bat species to white nose syndrome, which is a concern for bats in our region. And these bats, they eat insects, and this close proximity wetland to the maternity colony provides important forage for those bats. The open water wetland area supports a number of flowering shrub species, including salmonberries shown in this photo, and pollinators known to use the site include rufous and Anna's hummingbirds, as well as mason bees and western bumblebees. So a number of plans identify importance of acquisition of these sites, one of which is our Snoqualmie Wildlife Area Plan, which was recently drafted in 2018. And that plan specifically calls out purchase of properties adjoining our EB Island unit as important projects to move forward with. And that plan was developed in concert with an advisory group that includes a diverse group of folks that contributed. This project also fits within a current project we have underway, our EB Island Planning Project. And the goal of that project is to develop an overarching plan for our EB Island ownership. It involves robust stakeholder engagement with a variety of groups, farmers. It's funded by RCO's Estuary and Salmon Restoration Program, as well as NOAA funding. We're working with the Sustainable Land Strategy of Snohomish County, which is a group of people interested in conservation, restoration of fish, as well as farmers and flood control representatives. Ducks Unlimited is also a supporter of this. And this planning effort is identified as a near-term action in the Puget Sound Partnership. And how this acquisition relates to that effort is that by increasing our footprint of ownership in the area, it increases our opportunities to complete work in the area. And so there are a few threats that we see if we're not able to implement this project now. One is not having that opportunity to provide public access, not only on the site, but also the 300 plus acres that currently aren't able to be accessed. And it also, increasing the public ownership in the area, it increases our opportunities to do restoration in the future. Okay, so these next slides speak to community benefits and public access. And I think, this project, this is really the part of the project that I think is really might set it apart from other projects. And that's because it is in such close proximity to a huge population, bordered on the west by the city of Everett, to the east by Lake Stevens, and to the north by Marysville. This graphic is a heat map showing population density, and there, just Everett alone has about 100,000 residents, and it's just within about 2 miles from the city of Everett. And so this graphic shows our current ownership in the area, with the area in red. That is the location where we currently aren't able to get people in on foot. And the reason for that is because it's bounded by waterways and doesn't connect to any county road. So in order to access this area, people have to have a boat to be able to cross Deadwater Slough. And so this is how, this is where our proposed acquisition is. It fits in right there. And if we were able to purchase that, it does connect to a county road, which would allow people to access this area walking northward. And so by acquiring these properties, this area, this entire area in green would be new walk-in access for people, which is over 400 acres in size. Not only would this provide opportunity for recreation, but also for education. There are a number of schools surrounding the site with such a high population. And much of this EB Island site was purchased about 12 years ago from the YMCA. And in that purchase, a stated goal was to use the site as an outdoor classroom. And that's been hard for us over the years just because the access is difficult. And we believe with this acquisition, we would finally be able to provide those opportunities. And kind of an extra benefit of this project is the fact that EB Island, because it is historically, within a river delta, the only reason it's protected from incoming tides is because of human infrastructure, dikes and tide gates. And over time, as sea level rises, climate changes, it will likely become more difficult to protect the area over time. And if these properties were put into public ownership, it increases in public ownership, the habitat benefits would remain even if the area were flooded and transitioned into estuary habitat, whereas for private owners, that land value would likely decrease. This map comes from, it's a NOAA map online where you can increase sea level rise by any number of inches or feet. This is shows a 1 foot increase in sea level, and it shows EB Island underwater. The site would be added to our Snoqualmie wildlife area. And again, it's already adjacent to an existing unit, our EB Island unit. And this connection to an existing unit makes it more efficient for us for O&M. There's no new travel costs needed to go to a site that's not within our existing ownership. It also increases access not only for the public, but also for our wildlife area manager to get in and do work on that 300 acres that's currently not accessed. And our regional team, we've completed a number of projects similar to this over the last 5 years, and we're pretty confident we'd be able to implement this one as well should we get the funding. And so this project, we kind of see it in 3 phases. The first phase is the scope of work that's presented in this application. And it involves acquisition of the 2 properties from the 2 willing sellers, demolition of an incompatible structure. There's a single family residence where this X is shown. We would also do a wave of weed control on the 2 sites, put up some fencing, signage, and then evaluate this managed open water wetland, the infrastructure as part of that, and identify whether or not any enhancement actions are needed. And then a second phase, which we would likely apply for in the next biennium, would be to build a parking area where that home site was, along with a potential trail into our existing ownership. And if the study of the wetland indicates it's needed, potentially doing some wetland enhancement work. And a third phase, kind of looking far ahead as the area becomes more difficult to manage with rising sea levels. There could be an opportunity eventually to do a tidal marsh restoration project, which would add to the benefits to wildlife, including, of course, rearing juvenile Chinook salmon as they migrate downstream, and orca whale as they feed upon those Chinook salmon. And that was my last slide, and I'd be happy to take any questions.
Oh, okay, Lauren, if you let go of the mouse,
Okay.
thank you. I felt like we were in a little tug of war for the mouse. Sorry about that. Okay, team members have some questions for you, and we're going to start with Bill Robinson.
Hi.
Bill, feel free to turn on your camera if you don't mind.
Okay, I can do that. A big part of this wetland is there because of the tide gates. So in the long, particularly some of the salmon migration are prevented from going into this area because of the tide gates. So in terms of your long range management of this, what are the future of tide gates? Not only for the management of them, but really the practicality of having them as opposed to going back to a true marshy wetland.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one of the main issues we're looking to address in that overall EB Island planning project. So around 10 years ago, it was 2009, we acquired the majority of what is shown as our current ownership. Right when we bought that property, we launched into a feasibility study that looked at just that, at restoring the majority of the area back to tidal wetlands. The outcome of that feasibility study is just because of the configuration of the properties. It would be very expensive with the current configuration to do a big tidal project. And so kind of one of the main goals or the main outcomes of that study was to expand our ownership of the island to be able to do a bigger project when the time comes. And the reason why it's so expensive to do a tidal restoration project in this area is just because there are so many other remaining private properties that would need to be protected by a setback dike. And so, and as we take advantage of purchasing sites, someday we're hoping to piece together a really big tidal restoration project. But that's maybe many years away as of yet.
Great. Next questions are from Joe.
Okay. Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
Nice to finally see your face.
Yeah.
A correction and a recommendation on the significance of the bog.
Okay.
If it is indeed what we think it is, it would be the largest bog in the western lower 48 of the United States.
Okay.
There are definitely larger bogs up, matter of fact, up near Vancouver, BC, and in northeastern America. Nonetheless, very significant for Washington, let alone the western United States. Also, based on the LIDAR analysis that we did, it's possible it looks to us that there are raised bogs throughout the island. And essentially any of those forested wetlands look to us to be raised.
Okay.
And it looks like you have some of that on this property. So that could be something to highlight in terms of potential research and restoration opportunities of this particular site. If those areas indeed are part of a larger bog ecosystem or a network of bogs, that has a direct tie into the larger raised bog that you pointed out. So I just wanted to mention that because it does seem like that could be a very beneficial aspect of this site.
Great, thanks, Joe. I even thought about reaching out to you when I was putting this presentation together, but you got to see it firsthand, so.
Yeah, I didn't know what's happening. It's great.
Okay, Dave, I think you have a couple of questions or comments.
Yeah, just a sec. I can't seem to get my video to. Oh, that's kind of quick. Anyway,
that's okay. Just go for it.
So Lauren, oh darn. Okay. It wasn't clear in the presentation the difference between the acquisition as far as providing access for recreation, work, etc., and actually the wildlife benefit to the acquisition, i.e. there wasn't a threat, immediacy of threat wasn't addressed in your presentation, but probably moreover, what's the value of acquiring the property for wildlife, given that it may not be developable as this, there may be no threat to it at present. So I guess I'm teeing up the question that I'd like to get an answer to perhaps in your your final presentation.
Okay, yeah, great. I'll try to make that more clear. Yeah, because again, the bigger block of property here is currently enrolled in an NRCS easement. And so as far as development goes, I think those rights have largely been extinguished. But yeah, I'll try to better articulate what the wildlife benefits are in transferring it into public ownership. I guess the main benefit I see and what I might include on that slide is more information about how it really needs to be publicly owned for there to be a big tidal restoration project sometime in the future. Short of that, it would be difficult, might be difficult to accomplish. So yeah, I'll think about how to better portray that.
Okay, good. And then following up on that, what you just said, then a 1 foot increase in sea level, yeah, that's a real likelihood here. And then I just didn't get the transition between, I think you're going to have to address with climate change how this would be managed, the importance of it, i.e. given that sea level rise and change. A little better. I heard several things that were good, but I think maybe just, I don't know, that's a tough one. This is such a project that's got such a great public benefit. I think it'd be worth kind of exploring that a little bit more.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Joe, you're next. And you should unmute yourself.
Sorry, I just didn't lower my hand.
Oh, okay. Then Lydia, how about you?
Hi, yeah, I guess just following up with what Marguerite said about just how it'd be managed with climate change. And then also, I guess I was just wondering if you do eventually plan to breach levees and take out dikes and things like that, would there still be the public access and community benefits? Like, yeah, how would it be accessible, or how would it benefit the community if this area changed a lot with, taking out levees?
Okay, yeah, I can add some information about that. I'll have to think of a better way it's kind of a complicated concept to explain in a short amount of time in a presentation. I'll just have to try to think of a better way to explain that.
And then Lauren, you also it may be that you can use some kind of a graphic to help illustrate, because sometimes it's harder to explain, but a graphic might help you to show a little bit easier. So that may be another way to think about it too.
Okay.
It could be, something that you add in a couple of small bullets or short bullets to help convey that concept.
Okay.
Anybody else with thoughts or comments or recommendations that will help Lauren before evaluation? Well, thank you very much. We appreciate you being prepared and coming and presenting. And we look forward to seeing you again in September.
All right. Thank you all so much for your help. I'll come back in September with a little bit better presentation, I think, because of your
Sounds
comments.
good.
Yeah.
Team members, it's actually time for a break. So we'll give you an opportunity to mute yourselves and head off and refresh yourselves. And then our next presentation will start up at 2:30. And actually, if you're all back a little sooner than that, we'll see if Sarah, I think, is here. So we'll see if she'll be ready to start in about 10 or 15 minutes. But take a few minutes for yourselves. Thank you. Did you let Sarah in? Yes. Hey, Sarah, can you hear me?
I'm on it.
Oh,
I'm listening.
Siri. She thought I said.
Hi, this is
Hi,
Sarah. Hi, Marguerite. How are you?
I'm good. You know what's pretty funny is I said, hey, Sarah, can you hear me? And my phone is sitting here, and so Siri started talking
She
back to
started
me.
talking to you. That was not me.
I think it sounded, Sarah sounded too much like Siri, so she
Yeah,
decided
yeah.
she was going to answer. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
That's
This is the first of 3 RCO presentations we have this week, so
so
it's a
you're
full week.
busy.
Yeah, and
So
I'm hoping that my my computer arrows work. I was trying it this morning, and
so actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the remote to use. So let's practice with it for just a
Right.
little bit, okay?
Yeah,
And that way you'll know how it works.
sounds
So
good.
if you're ready, I'm giving
I'm ready.
remote control to, let me
Okay.
find you on my list, to Sarah. And so you now actually have control. So why don't you double click on the slide?
I just did that.
So now try to go forward or backwards, or there you go.
Okay.
So
Great.
that's all it'll be, is I'll
Perfect.
give you control like that, and then you'll be able to move forward with your presentation. So I'm going to
Excellent.
take back control for the moment,
Okay.
and
good.
and that's how it works. So you don't have to worry about trying the buttons. The main thing is when I give you control, just double click, and then it'll start to move, and you can go forward a slide just to make sure it's working and then start. Does that sound all right?
Okay, so the double click is just what gives me that initial control after you.
I guess so. We found
Okay.
when we did it with the first applicant, they had a little bit of trouble getting control. And so then the next applicant, he tried it and it worked for him, and he made 4 presentations. And so far it's been working that way.
Okay, great.
So yes, but it's for some reason or other on your end, I think you have to double click and then
All
you'll
right.
have control.
Sounds good.
Great. So I'm going to take a quick break, and
Okay,
then we'll get started soon.
sounds good. Thank you so much. definitely come through. Yeah, I think we're going to have him in presenting in about 5 minutes. Okay.
Hello, reviewers. Are you all back? If you are back at your station, will you just raise your hand so I can see if we're there? Janet's back, Dave's back, Joe, okay. We've got Pat, Bill. Let's see, who else are we waiting for? So John is not there yet. And Kelly, so, okay, Kelly's back, good. Matt, are you there? You and Mickey? Hopefully. So I just got, thank you very much. It looks like folks are almost back. We still have one or two that are not there. By the way, I just want to let everybody know, Kim, thank you for sending a note to remind me, I do have it on my schedule, that Venus is not presenting today, but Sarah is here, and Sarah is, pardon me. Yeah, I think, Sarah, are you presenting?
Yes.
Okay, so I am going to at least get things set up for you, and then we'll give just a couple more minutes for our review panel to all get back into the room. So I'm gonna escape out of this presentation. And I'll get yours. Are you doing Quimper?
That's the one.
Very good. Thank you for showing up a little early. Since one of our applicants is unable to participate, that helps us to keep moving forward, and we can get folks out a little earlier today. So we'll give a couple more minutes and see if we're missing anybody. I think everyone is just about here. And those of you that raised your hands, thank you very much for letting me know you were here. I think almost everyone is back. Pat, are you back at your workstation? Couldn't remember if I saw your hand go up. Okay, Dave, great. Dave, John, and Janet, that's good. Okay, I think we are just about ready to begin. So I am going to mute myself, stop my video, and turn the controls over to you, Sarah, and we'll do it just the way we did it a moment ago. And then when you have control, then you can get started with your presentation, and I'll just be quiet.
All right. Great, I think I've got control now. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah Spaeth, and I'm here on behalf of Jefferson Land Trust. And really want to thank you for the opportunity for your feedback and questions today. We're applying for $610,400 of urban wildlife habitat acquisition funds for the Quimper Wildlife Corridor, Jefferson Land Trust's first proactive project that's been underway since the mid-1990s. I'm personally really excited about this project because I was hired by the Land Trust in 1996 as project manager for the Quimper Wildlife Corridor. We've made a lot of headway since then, but we're quite ready for this next proactive push. The Quimper Wildlife Corridor is located in both the city of Port Townsend and in rural Jefferson County. You can see the, I don't know if you can see my cursor here, but Port Townsend is here and rural Jefferson County is here. The goal of this long-standing project is to protect a 3.5-mile greenbelt of native forest and wetlands stretching across the North Quimper Peninsula, providing habitat for numerous wildlife species and nature experiences for community members and visitors. Project partners have already protected significant, sorry, I'm getting a start my video. Is that relevant? No, sorry, I got a funny message.
Hey, Sarah. Hey, Sarah,
Yes.
it's Marguerite.
Yes.
If you don't mind, you can start your video, then the evaluators know who's actually talking to them.
Oh, I see. Start this video. Yes, okay. Thank you. Project partners have already protected significant portions of the Quimper Wildlife Corridor, but there are many remaining platted parcels in danger of development. And in January 2020, the Land Trust contacted private landowners of over 120 priority parcels in the Quimper Wildlife Corridor, and nearly 40 landowners responded favorably. And these are the parcels that are included in the PRISM application. Here on the map, you'll see that they are indicated in these cross-hatched. Oh, sorry, I'll go back again. You can see the cross-hatch kind of brown area, a brown coloration. Those are the parcels that property owners responded with. And you can see all of these dark green areas are Jefferson Land Trust preserves. The olive green are properties protected by the city and the county. And we have some DNR properties in the brown. So the goal of this phase of the project is to acquire and permanently preserve missing links in the corridor from numerous willing sellers that include important habitat and trail buffer parcels. Quimper Wildlife Corridor encompasses a landscape that is biologically and culturally complex, with a wide range of vegetation types, including wetlands, riparian, shrub, prairie, mesic or wet, and dry upland coniferous forests. The mature conifer forested habitat and a series of perched wetlands and forested wetlands, as well as the 100-year floodplain within the city of Port Townsend's largest drainage basin, form the backbone of the corridor. Habitat types targeted for conservation in this phase of acquisition include approximately 2 acres of wetlands, 2 acres of wet forest floodplain habitat, and 53 acres of mixed mature, mesic, and dry forest habitat. At least one legacy tree of over 600 years old is located on the largest property proposed for the acquisition, and that's this tree here, thought to predate to when the area was all prairie habitat, given the convoluted and contorted top of the trees. The Admiralty Audubon chapter has documented over 130 bird species in the Quimper Wildlife Corridor that use it during various life stages, including and also the green belt of native vegetation provides contiguous habitat for numerous other species, including 10 species of reptiles and amphibians, the smallest shrews and voles to mountain beaver, mustelid species, bobcat, coyote, black-tailed deer, and an occasional cougar, black bear, or elk. Bird, insect, mammal, and vascular floralists, as well as the species and communities with special status table are attached to the PRISM application. Let me get this slide to advance here. Priority bird species documented in the Quimper Wildlife Corridor include year-round occurrence of bald eagle, pileated woodpecker, peregrine falcon, and band-tailed pigeon, a migratory occurrence of Vox's swift and golden eagle, and historical breeding ground of wood duck. 8 Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife priority habitats are found in the geographic area of the Quimper Wildlife Corridor, including snags and logs, cliffs and bluffs, aspen stands, estuarine and marine, freshwater emergent, freshwater pond, and freshwater forested shrub habitats. Noxious weeds are present but not prolific and include holly with rare occurrences of English ivy, yellow archangel, tansy ragwort, Canada thistle, bull thistle, and reed canary grass. Numerous flowering shrub species are found throughout the Quimper Wildlife Corridor, including salmonberry, honeysuckle, red flowering currant, elderberry, native trailing blackberry and thimbleberry, and several native rose species, providing food sources for native bees and hummingbirds. The Quimper Wildlife Corridor contains the largest swath of undeveloped habitat within the city, extending out into Jefferson County and into unincorporated Jefferson County. The city, the Land Trust, and Jefferson County own permanently protected core habitat sections and connections in the project area, acquired over the 25+ years since the project inception, with funding from the County Conservation Futures, from the state, actually an urban wildlife habitat grant that went to the city as an alternate project several years ago, some federal funding and private foundation grant sources, as well as a lot of community support over the years. Several DNR lands are leased to Jefferson County through the Trust Land Transfer Program. And those are located here in this brown. There's a little tiny one here as well. As I mentioned earlier, Jefferson Land Trust lands that we own and permanently protect are in dark green. The olive green lands are owned by either Jefferson County or the city of Port Townsend. And these areas in this green here are conservation easements with Jefferson Land Trust. We hope to permanently protect these DNR parcels through another phase of the project and with full transfer of the properties to Jefferson County at a future time. All of that said, residential development is steadily increasing in forested areas to the west, north, east, and south. And of course, with that comes the threat of fragmentation of key habitat and trail networks. Partners and the community have prioritized additional important connective habitat and trail buffers that, once protected, will provide a more complete habitat corridor and preserve the integrity of the existing trail system. As a result of the outreach that I mentioned earlier to the private landowners, we now have the potential to acquire an additional 57 acres from interested private landowners. The ecosystem services provided by this project include natural control of stormwater to reduce flooding and aid in groundwater recharge, and human health and well-being benefits from the extensive trail network. The Land Trust, the City of Port Townsend, Jefferson County, state agencies, and local Audubon and Native Plant Society chapters, and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife have been partnering on the project, as I said, since the mid-1990s. Both the city and county's comprehensive plans speak to the importance of habitat corridors and trail networks and recognize the value of the Quimper Wildlife Corridor. The city's 2019 Stormwater Management Plan, key objective is to define, provide, and protect a connected and well-defined built natural drainage system. And this plan identifies the Quimper Wildlife Corridor and the 100-year floodplain as a level 1 backbone or trunk of the system. Properties identified as priorities for acquisition were indicated in this Quimper Wildlife Corridor plan that was adopted by the city on May 19th, 2008. And subsequently, additional buffer lands to trail corridors were identified as important recreational priorities for the city as adopted in City Resolution number 09034. In addition, Jefferson Land Trust's conservation plan for our county, updated in late 2019 with community input from stakeholder gatherings, online surveys, and outreach to public agencies, identifies filling protection gaps throughout the Quimper Wildlife Corridor as a priority. Current county commissioners and city council members were contacted with regard to this phase of the project. And we look forward to more in-person meetings with the elected officials. The threat to the Quimper Wildlife Corridor dates way back to the 1880s, when most of the city of Port Townsend and adjacent areas of Jefferson County were platted into 50 by 100-foot lots. And this was really in anticipation of Port Townsend becoming the San Francisco of the North, with the railroad ending here, which of course didn't happen, but we're still stuck with this planimetric from the 1880s. Over the nearly 25 years since this project started, we have witnessed a lot of residential development steadily infringing on the Quimper Wildlife Corridor as Port Townsend's population increases and roads, sewer, power, and water are installed. Most of the corridor's forested habitat is also not protected under critical area regulations. Some landowners are building structures without permits or vehicle access. As you can see, this area right here is a 35-acre piece of neighboring property. And it was clear cut a couple of years ago and is platted and permitted for 75 homes, ironically called Trail Crest because of all the trails next door in the Quimper Wildlife Corridor. For the most part, the simple acquisition is the preferred tool for protecting the Quimper Wildlife Corridor properties. An extensive network of trails on public rights-of-way throughout the Quimper Wildlife Corridor are used for nature immersion and appreciation. Exercise and passive recreation such as running, hiking, bike riding, horseback riding, and all trails are multimodal and family friendly. The forests and wetlands are field classrooms for the Port Townsend School District, the Swan School, Cedar Root Folk School, Jefferson Land Trust Natural History Society, the Native Plant Society, walks, Audubon walks, and annual Christmas bird counts, plus countless others. Multiple entry points are located on Jefferson Transit bus routes and are a short distance from most of the neighborhoods in the city. So you can see this pink line here is the city's bus route. And this core area right here is the main forested habitat within the city of Port Townsend, that is the Quimper Wildlife Corridor. The City Parks Department and the Active Transportation Advisory Committee coordinate the maintenance of the low mobility accessible primary trails. And this is one of those primary trails that is made ADA accessible through the city's efforts. Excuse me. Other community benefits provided by the Quimper Wildlife Corridor include carbon sequestration throughout the forests, critical aquifer recharge and natural stormwater retention and filtration provided by the hydrologically connected wetlands, floodplain protection, and climate adaptability and resilience due to maintaining the contiguous habitat corridor. Additional ecological and community benefits may be achieved by maintaining and enhancing structural complexity and biodiversity in the corridor, including through the potential reestablishment of pocket prairies once maintained by the Snoqualmie tribes of the peninsula. No development is proposed at this time, though we may at some point install some additional interpretive signs. Stewardship and management goals include Jefferson Land Trust and the city have been working together since 2008 when the Quimper Wildlife Corridor Management Plan was adopted. The desired future condition of the Quimper Wildlife Corridor is a contiguous corridor of late successional forests with greater vegetation height, structural complexity, numerous snags, and canopy layers. And we plan to update the Quimper Wildlife Corridor Plan to further define partner roles and prioritize future management activities. Restoration management activities associated with this effort include surveys, the boundaries, demolition of a few unsafe structures, and update of the Quimper Wildlife Corridor Management Plan. These activities are anticipated to cost about $30,000 over a 3-year time frame, which will be accomplished by staff and contractors and volunteers. The Land Trust has extensive experience managing preserves. We were formed in 1989 and we're nationally accredited, and we own about 600 acres of preserves as well as hold 65 conservation easements. We have a preserve steward program which provides an opportunity for long-term volunteerism, and volunteers contributed about 126 hours in 2019 alone on projects in the Quimper Wildlife Corridor, like installing signage, assessing habitat health, and removing trash. Volunteers are managed by the Jefferson Land Trust Preserve Manager and City Park staff. So far, the resources to fund this have been absorbed by the City and Land Trust. Funding for this ongoing work is anticipated to be done by Jefferson Land Trust through our fundraising efforts. I'm having trouble getting to the last slide here. We have a lot of community fundraising and a very dedicated staff, and have contributed some community funds to our long-term stewardship for the Quimper Wildlife Corridor and intend to do more of that. So thank you very much for this opportunity once again, and I'm happy to answer any questions and love to hear your feedback.
Thank you. Team members, are there questions or comments or recommendations for Sarah? Sarah, thank you for turning on your camera. It helps us to know who we're listening to, so we appreciate that. And I'm asking advisors if they'll turn on their cameras when they ask you questions or make comments to you.
Sounds
so
good.
Bill, why don't we start with you?
The maps, I'm looking at both the application and your presentation. It's really hard to tell from the parcel map what type of lots there are. Is it undeveloped land? Is it residential? You may have mentioned that it's all undeveloped, but it's really kind of unclear of are there houses on these sites, or is it all kind of undeveloped natural areas? And the maps are really pretty small. They're kind of hard to see, particularly on the video. Maybe you could separate the videos, the maps from the photos. You have some maps, particularly like your transit map. You had photos and a map on the same slide, and they're both so small. And the parcel map doesn't seem to have the border for the corridor. So it'd be nice to have some reference of what the corridor border is and then the parcels within it. But anyway, you may want to speak to the issue of the type of lots.
Great. Yeah, thanks. You are correct that none of these are developed. So it's all undeveloped land. And it is kind of hard to display that given the plats, which we also want to convey. But we'll work on trying to make that a bit clearer. Thanks, Bill.
Other questions, comments, suggestions? Sean?
Hi. Very good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to just kind of reiterate, I guess, what Bill said. I think in some of the maps, not having the platted background would be just fine. So you just rethink that. It's kind of, I get why you've included it, but sorry, I forgot to turn on my video, Marguerite.
That's all right.
I get why you want the plats to show, but at the same time, they kind of work against you a little bit because it leaves the impression that there's a lot of more developed infrastructure in place than there really is. So just think about how to make that a little clearer.
Okay.
The only other comment I have is the legend on a couple of the maps. The text is really small and hard to read at the size of at least my computer monitor. So if there's a way to enlarge the legend, the text, that would make it easier on the evaluator. So.
Great. Thank you, Bill. Or thank John.
And Sarah, don't forget that if you want to put up a parcel map, you can always put the map up something similar to this to show parcels, but then you can move on to an aerial view or where you've outlined what it is you're trying to buy. That would make it a lot easier for folks to see.
That's a great suggestion. Okay.
Lincoln, it looks like you may have a question.
I do, and sorry, Sarah, I don't have a camera, so I can't put myself up
there.
No
worries.
It looks like you've done an incredible amount of work in making this corridor happen, and you're getting close to where you can almost see how it could be completed. This current slide doesn't really show that connection too well. But I'm just wondering, because you've got priority 1 and priority 2, but it really seems like there are other properties which are farther maybe to the east, which would appear to be critical parcels to complete this whole thing. I'm just wondering why you're not showing those. Have you not made it there yet? Is this just more of an interim thing? In any case, it would be great to see that more complete picture.
Thank you. Yeah. We can work on that. Part of it is that we were, this phase, we were really trying to build on what we have already purchased so that we're really focused on continuity with existing protected parcels. So that's what the outreach letter went to, but also it always depends on who replies, what we're able to move forward with. So, yeah.
So it sounds like, I think Dave is the next person that has questions or comments for you.
Okay, Sarah, I was here just thinking about presenting the urban wildlife aspect of a corridor, and it's both a corridor where wildlife can move back and forth, but it's also a corridor where people, walk back through to access various habitats and see various species. So I was thinking that expanding on that a little bit, or bringing that into the presentation would be great. Either, and I think Lincoln mentioned, I think there's a lake off to the east or something. But anyway, bringing through photos and discussion, like what are as you walk from east to west or what are the habitats we're seeing? Maybe some photos of the, as you move along. Would be a better kind of bring us into this picture of the wildlife habitat in this corridor perspective. Yeah, you have some. Are these pictures along the trails? Are they, are people going to be walking through these kinds of forests? I guess, I don't know. I think I just thought maybe you could think about that a little bit more for the final presentation.
Okay, thank you, David. Yeah, I think the challenge is that sometimes we're spending a lot of time walking through the forest before you get to the next wetland, and we want to make the pictures compelling. So it'll be an interesting balance of trying to make sure that we don't overwhelm you with just another picture of trees, which of course are important for the corridor concept, but maybe aren't as exciting as focusing on kind of the high quality habitats that we're transiting to get to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm just still struggling with what I'm trying to, ask, but maybe linkages, maybe what are we walking by a number of, like mentioning the number of wetlands you walk by, or mentioning the ties between the lake habitat and the forest habitat, and maybe some other ties. Maybe can we walk from the corridor to the beach anywhere? Can we get to the park? Maybe expand that discussion a little bit and give us a broader perspective of, this feel of this urban wildlife experience.
Okay, I like that broader perspective of the experience. That's helpful.
Well, thank you, Dave. Bill, I see your hand is up. Do you still have a question or another comment that you wanted to make? And since I don't hear Bill, it most likely is he didn't lower his hand. So I'll take care of that for him. Anybody else with questions or comments? Well, Sarah, thank you so very much. I know that Beth will be in touch. She probably took down some of the questions and suggestions, and then we hope to be able to share that with you. And we look forward to seeing you again in September. Thank you very much for participating today.
Thank you, Marguerite. In September, not August, huh?
I believe it's September 16 and 17 is when we will do these evaluations.
Okay, that sounds
Since
great.
we pushed everything back a little bit, it'll be a little extra time, so.
Right, okay. Thank you very much, everyone. Appreciate your feedback.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to get ready for our next presentation. And it is for Tara and State Parks. We're going to let them in the room, make sure they're in. Oops, who's Venice? Oops. All right. Darcy, are you presenting today?
Charlie's actually going to be presenting on this project.
Okay, so let me see who. Oh, okay.
See Rains.
I see you.
And then I believe we have some folks from State Parks joining as well.
Okay, I think I saw Karen, and I think I saw one other person from State Parks. Is that Daryl? I think that is.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, then I am going to give you the remote control
Okay.
so that I'm going to, first of all, I have to stop my video and stop my sound, and then I'll give you the remote control. And when you take it over, if you double click on the screen, usually that lets it start to work. And then you might go forward with your arrow and backwards just to double check it.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Margaret, are you ready for us?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. All right. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. I'm Charlie Rains, Director of Forest Conservation at Forterra, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Dennis Wong and Darcy Hughes. From Washington State Parks, we have Karen Edwards, Property Specialist, and Daryl Klein, who manages St. Edward State Park. Forterra and Washington State Parks are partnering to add a significant parcel to St. Edward State Park, a unique urban wildlife habitat. We're proposing to acquire Arrowhead property to conserve one of the last undeveloped yet unprotected parcels of wildlife habitat on Lake Washington's shoreline within the greater Seattle urban area. The land will be acquired by Washington State Parks with a conservation easement held by Forterra. We are requesting $2 million from WWRP to match the same amount from King County Conservation Futures Program. We just found out last week that the advisory committee recommended the full $2 million grant request. While this needs approval by the county council, we are confident in the funding as the council has always approved the committee's recommendation in the funding list. So location, it's in King County along the northeastern shore of Lake Washington, northeast of Seattle. This map shows the region. The property is in the city of Kenmore with a population of 23,000. It is adjacent to residential areas and within 1.5 miles of Kenmore commercial and industrial areas along Highway 522. Within 4 miles are the cities of Kenmore and Lake Forest Park and portions of Kirkland, Bothell, Briar, Linwood, Shoreline, and Seattle, part of a contiguous urban area of over 3 million people. The next few slides describe the ecological and biological characteristics. The property is about 6.5 acres, but has multiple values. This forest, stream, and shoreline habitat is important due to its quality and rarity in this urban setting, but is even more valuable due to the adjacent state park. The Arrowhead parcel creates a larger block of habitat, which is critical for the key species such as the otter and bobcat, and provides a connecting link to other habitat in green spaces. The Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife Priority Habitats Program identifies the park and the Arrowhead property as a biodiversity area and corridor. It has been owned by the Menard family for over 70 years, and while they must sell, they want to conserve the property. This panorama shows St. Edward State Park to the south on the right, Arrowhead property in the center, and the adjacent Arrowhead Point neighborhood to the north on the left. The property is an integral part of this ecosystem, a high priority for preservation. Note the forested shoreline, rare for the heavily developed Lake Washington. The property is covered with a mesic wet conifer forest type, consisting primarily of mature Douglas fir, western hemlock, western red cedar, and big leaf maple, plus other native species including Pacific madrone, black cottonwood, and Oregon ash. Cedars are up to 40 inches in diameter and estimated at over 120 years old. The lush understory is composed of sword fern, salal, and Oregon grape, plus smaller amounts of vine maple, red huckleberry, osoberry, snowberry, hazelnut, and red elderberry. This shows the diverse and complex lowland forest of fir, hemlock, and madrone. Snags and woody debris add important habitat values, including these holes from a pileated woodpecker in the snag. This slide shows the Arrowhead property looking northward along the shore towards Arrowhead Point. The shore provides habitat for great blue herons and river otters. The large trees above the undisturbed lake shore provide suitable roosting and nesting habitat for great blue herons, bald eagles, osprey, and other raptors. The lake and nearshore zone provide habitat for many aquatic species, including Chinook, sockeye, and coho salmon, as well as small prey fish for salmon and herons. It also provides habitat for ducks, cormorants, and gulls. The property has significant use by terrestrial wildlife. The Menard family funded 6 remote cameras, which were installed on the property this spring by Professor David Stokes from the University of Washington, Bothell. These have recorded several native species, including coyote, bobcat, black-tailed deer, Douglas squirrel, red-tailed hawk, and mallard. Previously, cameras were installed in the state park just adjacent to the Arrowhead property by Professor Stokes. Those cameras have documented use of the park property by several additional species, including bald eagle, long-tailed weasel, mountain beaver and river otter, and amphibians, which likely use the Arrowhead property due to adjacency and high-quality habitat, according to Dr. Stokes. The Arrowhead property acts as a wildlife corridor along the shoreline and creek connecting St. Edward State Park to nearby green spaces. Of particular note is the bobcat, Lynx rufus, which requires a large range and undisturbed habitat. This photo was taken April 16th of this year. The UW studies indicate the property supports diverse native wildlife species, reflecting high quality and diversity of habitats and connectivity to other habitats in the region. Protection of this property will likely improve the probability of persistence of wildlife in the park, according to Dr. Stokes. The Arrowhead property also contains parts of 2 unnamed perennial streams that combine to form a larger stream, which then flows into Lake Washington, part of Rio 7. The 880 feet of stream includes both banks with riparian vegetation of salmonberry, maidenhair fern, and devil's club. The larger stream is also accessible to the 3 sill-mounted species and provides habitat for many aquatic invertebrate and vertebrate species. The property has several native flowering plants. Osoberry, salmonberry, and snowberry are pollinated by hummingbirds and bees. Osoberry is also pollinated by moths and butterflies. This species, also known as Indian plum, is an early flowering plant with nectar important for hummingbirds and other pollinators. The primary service area are the cities of Kenmore and Kirkland, but the property will be added to the state park, which has a regional service area. Nearby land uses are residential areas, state park, and a golf course. Commercial industrial areas about 1.5 miles to the north. The landscape is a varied topography with lakeshore and streams covered in a mixed lowland forest, as shown previously. Ecological benefits include high-quality fish and wildlife habitat, protection of water quality, and attenuating flooding, as described in upcoming slides. The project has extensive planning and community support. The property has been identified as an important addition to the state park in its 2007 classification and management plan, CAMP, which was developed with extensive public involvement. As part of the plan, the adjacent McDonald property was acquired in 2008. In his management recommendations for the state park in the 2019 report, Dr. Stokes specifically mentions the importance of conserving the Arrowhead property. Quote, help facilitate protection of additional nearby unprotected lands of high habitat value. As part of the above process, work with Forterra, Mounts of Sound Greenway, King County, the cities of Kenmore, Kirkland, and others to identify additional green space of high habitat value for protection through acquisition, conservation easements, or other means in areas near the park. This is particularly important on the north and south sides of the park, where significant forested lands still exist near the park boundary. End of quote. There is demonstrated public need. This project helps meet the goals of the City of Kenmore Comprehensive Plan, which specifically mentions the St. Edwards Park vicinity as a priority for open space acquisition. It is also consistent with the city's Shoreline Master Program, which says that, quote, areas containing special shoreline recreation qualities not easily duplicated should be available for public use and enjoyment, and opportunity should be provided for the public to understand natural shoreline processes and experience natural resource features, end of quote. There is strong community support for this acquisition from the City of Kenmore, as noted earlier, and community groups such as Sierra Club, Eastside Audubon, and Washington Native Plant Society. Professor Stokes of UW-Bothell also wrote a letter of support. The King County Conservation Futures Advisory Committee just recommended funding for the full $2 million grant request, which will be a match for WWRP. This demonstrates strong regional support for this project. If not acquired, the property would be sold and converted to residential development. Zoning would allow up to 12 lots, while critical areas may limit development. Pending analysis indicates that houses could be built with associated driveways, gardens, and other features of urban residences. This is the adjacent neighborhood with high levels of impervious surface. On the other hand, if acquired, the property will be fully protected by Washington State Parks as a natural forest. There are many community benefits. A significant benefit is its watershed value. Downstream from the property, creek flows through a residential neighborhood. Retaining the natural forest watershed will attenuate flooding in that reach. This shows one of the houses on this adjacent to the creek. The property has opportunities for research, education, and citizen science. Ongoing studies in the park can be extended to this property, as has been done with the cameras. The photos on the left show UW students collecting data in the state park. On the right are Forterra and University of Washington biologists surveying the property. Above right is one of the remote cameras installed in March by Professor Stokes. Local school and community programs bring young people to the park, and that will be available on the Arrowhead property, consistent with habitat protection. Unimproved trails on the property provide access from the state park while maintaining high quality habitat. The lake and shore are available for boats, but without facilities. Public access is from the lake or by trail from the park. Public transit is available. The closest bus stop to the state park is a 12-minute walk from the entrance, then about a 15-minute walk on trails from there to the property. Low impact recreation such as walking and bird watching will be available. The property has multiple benefits: diverse and high quality wildlife habitat, fish habitat in streams and the lake, high water quality, flood attenuation as natural forest cover will ameliorate flooding downstream during storm events, aquifer recharge, education and citizen science as exemplified by the UW-Bothell research on the property. It will also be available to local schools and community groups via the state parks. Low impact recreation, such as walking, bird watching, and nature study. The forest absorbs summer heat and shades the creek. The forest also stores significant amounts of carbon. Together, we have organizational capacity to manage and steward this property well. Washington State Parks will manage the property as part of St. Edward State Park as a natural forest per their management plan. Forterra has extensive experience in monitoring conservation easements and doing restoration work. The management and stewardship plan is the Washington State Parks Camp for St. Edward State Park. Arrowhead is in remarkably good condition. However, some restoration is needed. Some invasive plants such as ivy, blackberry, and holly are found along the northwest boundary with the neighborhood adjacent to that development and along the informal trail. These species could be controlled with volunteer restoration activities. A small derelict cinder block building without a roof will be removed within a year of acquisition. Arrowhead is a remarkable, multifaceted property with high fish and wildlife values in a dense urban landscape, the goal of the WWRP Urban Wildlife Habitat category. It is a crucial element of the ecosystem anchored by the state park. Forterra and Washington State Parks are partnering to protect this land with the support of King County. We look to WWRP for financial assistance to make this a reality. Thank you. Margaret, back to you.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you for giving me the mouse back. That can be a problem sometimes. Okay, team members, and it looks like Bill has a question. So Bill, why don't we start with you?
Charlie, it's a good presentation.
Thank you.
I would, this will be a conservation easement held by Forterra. What are the restrictions on that easement going to be in terms of developed trailheads, any docks or anything along the waterfront, and then maintaining natural forest?
Right.
What are the conditions of that easement?
The conservation easement, which will be funded by King County, will come under their conservation futures program, and it will be drafted to be completely consistent with state parks natural forest designation for this area. In talking with state parks, as I mentioned, the protection of the forest with light recreation, there will be no facilities on the shore. So that's what we can expect, and the easement will be totally consistent with that.
Will you be responsible for doing the stewardship of the easement, or is Parks going to do all that?
Parks will be managing it, and we will be monitoring the conservation easement, and we anticipate partnering with them on some of the restoration activities.
Other questions or comments from team members? Go ahead. It looks like John, you have a comment.
Yeah, hi, Charlie. Good presentation. I guess I have two comments that are related. One is that I think you touched on it a little bit, but I, at least as an evaluator, I would benefit from more explanation of what this project adds to conservation of the parcel that isn't provided by shoreline protections or riparian protections along that stream. Just in the final presentation, if you could elaborate on the differences there, the additional conservation gain by the acquisition. And what was the second one? Oh, the second one is at times I wasn't sure how much the presentation really applied to the existing state park versus what really is the additional gain from the parcel in question. And so I would encourage you to spend a little more time on talking about what the parcel adds to the whole.
Right, good comments. Just briefly, it obviously is a synergy that, as Dr. Stokes says, they work together. I think some of the items that are particularly important is the watershed value, because most of that creek is actually on the property and not on the park. I think just the additional shoreline, natural shoreline, where salmon are coming up the lake, has a lot of value. The development is the landowners are looking to see what development is potential without hiring somebody to actually do a development plan. So we're anticipating there could be several houses, maybe clustered, with all the rest of the stuff, the houses, the yards, the driveways, and such. The creek has already been crossed. The access for housing has already crossed the creek. So I would expect a significant amount of impact, some of it from construction, but also from just having more people and more development move into what is clearly a key corridor for wildlife, such as the bobcat.
So one thought occurred to me as you were responding. I don't know if there is a way, but if there is a way to estimate X number of additional residences could be built, that would give all of us as evaluators some tangible way to go, that's the impact.
Right.
So
And as just so you know, I mean, we've been working with the family, and they have always wanted to conserve it, and so haven't spent the money on doing a development plan, hiring a developer to figure out what's the maximum you could do there. So, but they are taking a look at it and having a professional look at it. And so by the time we do our final presentation, we should have a little more of that information. I may not be able to tell you whether it's exactly, 3 or 5 or 6 houses, but we hope to be able to give you a little bit more specifics.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any other reviewers with questions or comments that might help this sponsor prepare for evaluation? It sounds like folks have shared what their thoughts are for you people. Thank you so very much for joining us and for joining us early. Really appreciate that. And we look forward to seeing you folks back here. Same place, same time, same bat channel. We'll actually be joining us back here in September on the 16th and 17th when we have our evaluation meeting. So thank you, everybody. Really appreciate you joining us.
Okay, thanks very much,
Marguerite. Thanks, everyone.
So team members, believe it or not, you are at the end of day 1. We have just now completed our review. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a minute and we can have a little bit of a chat just to make sure that you're all on the same page and ready to go. But we have completed our projects. I'm sorry, there was one project that was on our schedule and unfortunately they had another emergency and wasn't able to present today. So we plan to start up again tomorrow morning. Can anybody tell me what time?
9 o'clock.
Oh, great. Thank you very much for letting me know. We will see you all back here. And I think you'll want to do what you did today, where you just log on a few minutes early to just make sure you're all set and ready to go. If anybody needs a little technical help, Tessa and I will be here for a moment or two longer, and we're more than happy to do that. And if there are no other questions, any other questions? Bill, you popped on your camera. I wasn't sure if you had a question.
I do have a question.
Go for it.
So we've been listening to presentations. I've been making comments up in the general comment section. Do you want us to wait till tomorrow night and send those to you? And then will you forward them to the project sponsors, or are you going to edit them and make your own suggestions?
Thank you. Thank you so very much for asking that, Bill. This will be a good reminder and a refresher for everybody. So as you're putting comments in the little notes section, whether it's general comments or comments for a specific evaluation criteria, that's a perfect way to share some of your thoughts. What we ask you to do is to just hang on to them. And at the end of our meeting tomorrow evening, we'll give you one more chance just to see if there's something else that you want to add. And then if you submit those comments to RCO, then the outdoor grants managers have a chance to go in, grab your comments and look at the ones to see which ones were specifically ones that you were sharing with the applicant. And then they will put them in a separate file. The applicant can't see what's in this review module, but they'll put it in the application review materials and then share it with the applicant as appropriate. So, you know, feel free, whatever comments you there, it's open to the public, but the comments some of you may have written are primarily for yourselves. Others of you may have written where there's some notes that's worthwhile that we could share with the applicants, and we are more than happy to do that for you. So yes, just hang on to them until the end of the day tomorrow. Any other questions or thoughts? Well, thank you, everybody. I saw a hand up. Kelly, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, sorry. Yeah, just on what Bill was saying, maybe I can talk to you guys offline, or I don't know if anyone else has this problem, but so if you have your comments in there, how do you know that will they just, I thought that when I looked at the little tutorial, it said kind of where you then submit them. Is there a place that you then, or is it just in there?
Yeah, There's actually a button at the top of, if you go to the project list flip page as you navigate.
Oh, okay.
Using Prism Online. At
Yes.
the very top, just don't submit it until the end of the meeting, because once you submit it, then you can't, it makes it a challenge for you to put other comments in. You can't resubmit. So
Okay.
that's one reason why we ask you to hold on to them until tomorrow. And then at the end of the day, then you can submit.
Okay, I see it now. I didn't see it in the actual individual projects. Okay, great. Thank you.
And the way we've designed it is the grant manager can go in and import those comments, and then the grant manager will scan through them, because sometimes you were just making notes for yourself, and other times you were making notes that it's a question or a suggestion or something that would be relevant to the applicant, and so they'll help to make that do what is appropriate edit and pass along the comments that are appropriate to the applicant. Other questions or thoughts? Well, thank you everybody for joining us for our first day, for our first online technical review meeting that we actually ended up sharing live on YouTube this afternoon. So that was a good thing. And we thank all of you viewers that joined us today. We will be back again tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock to finish up our technical reviews for critical habitat and natural area categories. Thank you. Have a good evening.